In this week's episode, we're going to install some injectors that I got off of Amazon. So after I installed the 1.616 valve engine, I ran pretty good, but I noticed when you're in low range, first gear, second gear, somewhere in there, and you're doing lots of that, all of a sudden it starts making a, I don't know, it's a weird burbling noise. It's hard to explain, but it's basically what I think is happening is one of these injectors in there, the original injectors, is maybe a little dry or something like that from sitting for a long time, and it's not spraying properly at low RPM, and it's slobbering fuel in there, and it's essentially flooding that one cylinder. And I know when you fire it up, you'll get a puff of black smoke, and if you're putting along, you know, and then all of a sudden you got to give her a shot of fuel, she barks out a wad of black smoke. The guys behind me are telling me. So I'm thinking one of these injectors is not so good. And you can also hear a clicking. You can hear clicking somewhere around the fourth injector. It's making a tick, 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 tick noise. It goes away at higher RPM, but at low RPM, the ticking comes back. So we're going to replace the factory injectors that I got off of eBay. Hopefully they're going to be good. They're reasonably cheap, and you know how that goes. Sometimes cheap isn't good. But we're going to try it anyhow, and I'm going to show you guys how to do it. Probably some of you guys are thinking, you know, it's a simple job, but there are people out there that don't know what an injector is, or how it works, or how you even change them. So I'm going to just show it, simple video, fairly quick, on how to change these. And it should be a simple job, but they've probably been in there since day one, so it could be a real pain in the butt. Hang in there, let's change these injectors out. Okay, so a real quick explanation on how these injectors work is your fuel pump puts fuel down a rail that 4 of these injectors are inserted into. They're held in just by this O-ring and the rail pressing down this O-ring down into your intake manifold. And it puts so much voltage to this when it's supposed to be on the compression stroke, and it's supposed to spray a mist of fuel out, a nice cone-shaped mist of fuel out. And if the injector is worn or dry or whatever, it's not going to spray properly, and it's going to probably drop big blotches of fuel in there, which is not your optimal spray pattern. Obviously you want a real nice fine cone, and if it does that, then it basically is dropping more fuel in there than you need, and it's flooding the cylinder. And at lower RPMs it's not getting a complete burn. So at higher RPMs it seems to be fine, but at low RPMs it's flooding. So there's your injector. So let's go ahead and see if we can take that fuel rail off and get the injectors out. So it's fairly hard to show you in here, but the end of this is the end of the fuel rail here. And the fuel comes in from the back side into the back of the fuel rail, pressurizes up this rail, and then it feeds those injectors every time it gets the electrical signal to spray the pattern. So there's 3 bolts on this fuel rail to the intake that I'm going to attempt to take out. This tube obviously has to come out of here, and the fuel line has to come out, and then hopefully I can pull this injector rail back and then remove the injectors. Tried to take this rail off without taking the intake off, just too tight. So had to undo a bunch of bolts, a couple of hoses, unclip the injector electrical part of the injectors, and then just basically pull this rail back. And your injectors are really solidly stuck in. But here's the one I think is giving the trouble. This one right here. So, but we're going to go ahead and replace all the injectors in this thing and then put her back together. And sorry I didn't show that stuff, but it was a bit of a pain in the butt. But we got her. So I'm going to go ahead and remove these injectors now and install the new ones. gonna clean these little ports here and also pull there's rubbers in here that the injector mounts onto also. We'll pull each one of them out. The new injectors come with new rubbers. Now we'll prep the new injectors. We'll lube the oil rings, clean up these ports in here, and get ready to install the new injectors. You can see these are real dirty in there, all but the last one. The last one's clean, so that tells me something was being funky with the last one or something. So I'm just going to add a little bit of this moly coat to these sealing rubbers. That way, hopefully they're not seized in there like they were if I ever got to take this apart again. These O-rings will be lubricated up, and they hopefully won't be seized up again. And it should help it slip back into the fuel rail. Okay, so now we just want to try and get our fuel rail back on without getting any grime or nasty stuff back in those injectors. So it should be just a matter of lining them up and sticking them back in the hole. I think we just want to torque these real lightly. Just keep going back and forth as we push the injectors home, because we don't want to bend that fuel rail. Put our injector wires back on. It should be just a matter of reversing the process now. And I'm gonna have to make a new gasket here. I ripped this gasket when I was taking it off. I'll either make a new gasket or I'll just put the right stuff in there and set the intake back down, clean up the surface real good. Just gotta get some of this stuff back together. There we go. So I got the intake on. I use the right stuff as a gasket, and these are basically just barely hand tight. I'll let it set up for an hour or so, and then I'll torque it down to spec, and we should just about have her. Just make sure to tighten down all your hose clamps. Make sure every bolt that you took off is back in place and everything's tightened down. Put these two sensor wires back up. So now we're basically down to just tightening up these last 8 bolts, and we should be good for a fire up. But I'm gonna let that right stuff cure a little bit for a few hours for sure before I attempt to fire it up. All right, so it looks like everything is tightened up and ready to go, I should be ready to try and fire this baby up. Well, she fired right up. Sounds good. I don't hear no ticking now. Nice and responsive. I think I got her. I think that's what the problem was. So that concludes the old injector install. Really, actually a pretty simple job. You just gotta bite the bullet and take that intake off and remove it. And it's actually pretty simple to do. It's fairly quick. You can do it in an afternoon, and it made a big difference. I can't wait to take it wheeling, and we'll see how it works out now and how it drives, how the drivability is. So if you guys are liking this sort of content and you're getting some value out of it and you're learning some things, go ahead, subscribe, share these videos, hit the bell to be notified for future videos. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, it's @fabin_adventures. Go ahead, look in the description below to a link to my store where you can pick up shirts and hoodies and help support the channel. And we'll catch you guys next Friday.